So cardistry and magic has always been something that's pretty dividing within the community. Of course, on one hand, we have certain magicians who think that cardistry is pretty much completely useless, and it shouldn't be part of magic and in general. Some people are sort of in the middle ground where they're like, okay, cardistry can be useful in certain situations, but it should be done sparingly. And then of course there are those magicians who just aren't afraid to do like full-on packet cuts or fans or just aerials during the routines. So there's basically a whole bunch of camps in this sort of topic. It's something that no one is ever going to basically agree with, and that's fine because it all depends on personal style of performance and just thinking. But still, let's discuss some of the pros and cons of using cardistry while performing magic. So the most extreme point of view is that cardistry is completely useless to magic and just shouldn't belong to basically anywhere near magic, which is certainly, I think, a very, very limiting point of view. It's very limiting to just completely just reject something, even just inspiration wise, because it's like if we take a look at various different magicians, Joshua Jay looks at cinema and theater and stuff like that. Garrett Thomas actually looked at like miming to get inspiration from magic. So completely blocking off a certain sort of subject is very limiting. So even if you don't agree with integrating cardistry into magic, it's still something I think that's very interesting to sort of study within sort of just how playing cards interact with each other and all of that stuff. So it's just like healthy doses of something. And then on the other hand, we have, of course, the middle ground, where we have the occasional flourish in a performance. And this is certainly probably a common point of view, and it's also sort of a old-ish point of view as well, because even Thomas Nelson Downs, the author of The Art of Magic back in 1909, actually sort of spoke about using flourishes in magic, and there's actually a certain quote associated with his point of view. Quote, "The performer is earnestly advised to curb the very natural desire to exploit his dexterity, or in plain language, to show off, and to be sparing in exhibiting fancy movements. It is effective to introduce a flourish or ornamental sleight at odd moments between tricks, or while the assistant is performing some duty among the audience." Unquote. And that is basically at the very, very beginning of the book. I believe in certain editions is on page 7 or 9. So it's something that is very, very early, mentioned early on. Aaron Fisher actually mentions it in his Penguin Live lecture as well, where he says that if you feel like your audience is sort of slipping away and that you need to sort of draw their attention back to you again, he says that, you can use the occasional flourish like a spring to just grab their attention back because it's loud, it's visual, it's just something that's just, flashy enough to get their attention back to you. And that, I think, is a very, very reasonable point of view. Just some eye candy to sort of just stop blasting people with like emotional and slow build-up moments and stuff like that, because at some point those do get sort of exhausting, so you do want some quick flashy things to sort of just refresh them, let's just say. Or, of course, some other magicians also think that you can use one or two sort of flourishes to enhance certain moments in your routine. So for example, if you sort of want to indicate a change of a card, let's just say, you can just do your switch or whatever, and then do a pirouette. Because this sort of card spin, it just looks mesmerizing, right? It just spins at your fingertips, and then it's sort of like a magical moment in of itself. It's a signal that something magical has happened. So using your pirouette, you can then indicate the card has changed. I think that's a pretty interesting use of cardistry in magic. And again, it's a very, very small sort of moment, but I think that just having that like flourish, that card just spin, I think that adds a lot to just the general moment. But the general reasoning behind why there's sort of an aversion to using cardistry in magic is because it signals that you're skilled, which in most sort of craft and arts and sort of any performance thing, that would be a good thing. You want people to know that you are skilled and that you can handle things and that, they are hiring someone who is worthwhile. But in magic, a lot of people actually see differently. A lot of people sort of see that when you're indicating that you have skill, you have control over the situation. And when you have control over a situation, that's sort of a clash between sort of the situation being magical, right? Because when you're doing magic, you want to be as far removed from that fantastical, that mystical, that magical side, because then it feels more magical inherently, right? It feels like it's just happening because it's actual magic and not someone's skill influencing the situation. So essentially you're saying that, well, if you're doing flourishes in the middle of a routine, you're essentially saying that you are the one responsible for all this magic. You are the one who is skilled enough to manipulate the situation to seem like that is magical, right? So that is the main point why anyone would sort of distance themselves from cardistry, just to avoid people associating the magician with skill, and then that reduces the magic inherently, right? But I don't necessarily think, or I don't necessarily subscribe to that belief. To some degree, I actually think it's actually sort of insulting, I think would be the best word, because you're assuming that your audience would just be like, they would subscribe to also your belief that, yeah, they believe it's real magic and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think that people, like, there will be certainly some people, depending on the group that you're performing for, who are like, yeah, that might be real magic. Like, oh, I believe in real magic. But I don't think having skill in a situation necessarily removes the impossibility of a certain situation, right? I think at the end of the day, people do know that you as a magician, you are influencing the situation. Your skill is playing a role in shaping how this impossible moment is happening. So ultimately, I do think that just assuming that, oh yeah, they're going to think it's real magic, and that having them thinking that skill related will reduce the magic, I think that is to some degree insulting. But of course, that I think that at the end of the day, that depends on you and your point of view and how you actually present your magic. So it is a very, very personal sort of approach to things. Now, on the other hand, there's also other people like Franco Pasquali or Joao Fontaine who actually just aren't afraid to do like flourishes and just add flair to just their card handling. Like Joao actually just straight up does like flourishy productions and stuff like that. Like he is very, very stylistic, and Franco just does like flourishy false cuts and all that stuff. So yeah, it's just that people have a different point of view, and that they think that doing cardistry mid-routine adds flair and a certain mystique, especially with how the cards move. Like this is absolutely like the way this card actually just flutters around. Like that's to some degree also very, very magical as well, right? Magical and magic is two different things, but it does add some sort of again, presence to the objects that you're using, right? But ultimately, like I said, it all depends on character. It all depends on how you frame your magic and your capabilities, right? So if you want to lean into the magic aspect, that is entirely up to you. If you want to lean into the mystical aspect, that is entirely up to you again, right? And of course, there are people who do like gambling routines who lean into the fact that they are extremely skilled, right? So it really does depend on how you want to present your magic, how you present yourself, and how you present your character, right? Do you want to do gambling routines? Do you want to do like things that are like self-working, so then you can sort of distance yourself from the magic? That is, again, up to you. And so every performer is different, and that's fine, right? It's fine that every performer is different, and I would say that's great that every performer is different, because there's no point in doing anything if everyone is doing the same exact thing. So if you like doing cardistry and magic, do it, right? That's entirely up to you. You are the performer, not like some other guy. So yeah, I mean, so honestly, again, right? If you like doing cardistry and magic, add it in. If you don't like it, then don't add it in, right? At the end of the day, you are your own performer, you are your own character, and everything, like performance-wise, is dictated by you. But I will say this though, even if you don't use cardistry in your performance, why don't you practice it, right? There's nothing inherently wrong, I think, with increasing the dexterity with your fingers. And I think that Cardistry does a great job as sort of training your fingers and all that stuff. So yeah, and also there's plenty of magicians who actually look at Cardistry and see the ways that cards actually interact. There's a lot of interesting sort of ways that cards actually interact that I think that people sort of overlook because they just aren't that into Cardistry. So for example, Jack Patton. Jack Patton looks at Cardistry to get inspired for different magic mechanics. And for the most part, they like, obviously sometimes there will be like slight flashes and stuff like that, but for the most part, like, those are very, very interesting ways to look at how cards actually move and how they interact and stuff like that, right? Those are interesting productions and color changes and all that stuff. So there is inherently nothing to lose in studying Cardistry, even if you don't lose it. You don't use it. There, that's the proper word. Because at the end of the day, right, even if you don't use something, if you just like experience it, if you just study it, if you just look at it, even if it's not an overt presence, it's still gonna be something that sort of influences the way that you think, the way that you do things, and all that stuff, right? Like I said, for Joshua J, cinema, theater, and stuff like that, that influences his style of magic. For Garrett Thomas, miming and other things like dance, right? They're not really related to magic, but those do influence their styles as well. And so, again, even if you don't use it, why not study it? You're not really losing much on anything, so yeah. And that's on using cardistry in magic. It is a very, very small and pretty much niche sort of topic, and it's not like I'm actively a cardist, even though I post a flourish every now and then, but it's magic, it's personal, it's style, and it's something that only you can sort of determine and sort of guide your way through. So whatever you choose for your performances, that's up to you, right? It's your choice, it's your character, and not anyone else's. So at the end of the day, if you want to add cardistry, that's up to you. If you don't, that's also fine. And then that also applies to any style of other things they want to add. Like, oh, do you want to add like coin magic to it? That's completely fine as well. So honestly, I think at the end of the day, just make sure that your character is pretty much cohesive, it's coherent, and yeah, that's the end of it. That's just finding individualism in art and stuff like that. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.